The morning sun cast long shadows across New York City's first contact district as Marcus Chen prepared his food truck for another busy day. Steam rose from the cooking stations inside his small kitchen, carrying the sweet and savory smells of his grandmother's recipes into the cool autumn air. Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and looked out at the changing neighborhood. 5 years ago, this had been just another quiet corner of Queens. Now, colorful alien script-decorated shop windows and beings from across the galaxy walked the streets alongside humans. Some floated, others crawled, but they all seemed to be adjusting to life on Earth. As he arranged his ingredients, a flash of soft blue light caught his eye. A tall, thin figure stood at the corner, her skin giving off a weak glow that pulsed slowly like a fading heartbeat. Marcus recognized her as a Scifi, one of the newer refugee groups to arrive on Earth. Her long, delicate fingers traced patterns in the air as she studied the menu board, her large, silver eyes reflecting the morning light. "Can I help you?" Marcus called out, keeping his voice gentle. He'd learned that some alien species found loud human voices uncomfortable. The Scifi woman startled slightly, her skin flickering purple for a moment before returning to its dim blue. She approached the truck slowly, her movements careful and precise. Up close, Marcus could see that her clothes, a simple Earth-style dress, hung loose on her frame. She started, her translator device creating slightly metallic-sounding English. "I am trying to understand your currency system." She held out a handful of coins and crumpled bills, arranging them carefully on the counter. "Is this enough for a meal?" Marcus counted the money, barely $5 in mixed change. His cheapest menu item was $8. Looking more closely at his potential customer, he noticed how her skin's glow flickered unevenly, a sign he'd learned meant poor health in Scifi physiology. "Are you familiar with Chinese food?" he asked, already reaching for his personal lunchbox where he packed his grandmother's special dumplings. The Scifi shook her head, causing ripples of weak light to dance across her skin. "I have only been on Earth for 3 days. The refugee center provided basic nutrition packs. But..." She trailed off, looking down at her insufficient handful of coins. "Here," Marcus said, opening his lunchbox and arranging the dumplings on a clean plate. "Try these. They're on the house. They're free." The Scifi's eyes widened, and her skin pulsed with a sudden burst of bright yellow. "Free? But..." She glanced around as if expecting someone to object. "Is this allowed?" "Of course," Marcus smiled, adding a small cup of his grandmother's secret dipping sauce. "Everyone should get to try real Chinese food at least once." With trembling fingers, the Scifi picked up a dumpling. Her species had similar nutritional needs to humans, one of the reasons they'd chosen Earth as a refugee destination. She carefully dipped it in the sauce, as Marcus had shown her, and took a small bite. The reaction was immediate. Her entire body lit up with swirling patterns of gold and pink, brightening the morning air like a sunset. Tears, glowing with the same golden light, rolled down her cheeks as she savored the bite. "This," her translator crackled with emotion, "this contains memories of love." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Well, they are my grandmother's recipe. Our species," she explained between bites, her glow growing stronger with each one. "We can taste the emotions of those who prepare food. These were made with such care, such..." She paused, searching for the word. "Such love." Around them, other morning commuters, human and alien alike, had stopped to watch the display of lights and colors emanating from the overwhelmed Scifi. But Marcus barely noticed them, too caught up in the revelation that his grandmother's love could literally be tasted in her recipes. The Scifi finished the last dumpling and bowed deeply. "I am Kelera," she said, her voice steadier now, her glow healthy and bright. "And you have given me much more than just food today." The crowd that had gathered around Marcus's food truck slowly dispersed, but Kelera remained, her skin now glowing with a steady, healthy blue light. She stood quietly, watching as Marcus served other customers, her large silver eyes taking in every movement as he prepared different dishes. "Would you like to sit?" Marcus asked during a quiet moment, pointing to a small folding chair he kept behind the truck. "You still look a bit tired." He noticed how she swayed slightly, even though her glow was stronger after eating. "Thank you," Kellara said, settling into the chair gracefully. "I should explain about our food customs. What you did, sharing your personal meal." Her translator crackled as she searched for the right words. "On my world, such an act has deep meaning." As she spoke, another Zixteri walked past the truck, stopped, and stared at Kellara's bright glow with obvious surprise. The newcomer's own skin barely flickered, showing the same signs of poor health Kellara had shown earlier. "Are many of your people having trouble getting enough food?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice low. Kellara's glow dimmed slightly. "Our customs, they make it difficult. In our culture, food preparation is sacred. We can only eat food made by those we have a deep bond with, family, life mates, or those who have earned great trust. The refugee center's food meets our physical needs, but without the emotional connection, it doesn't sustain us properly." Marcus thought about this while preparing an order of noodles for a human customer. "Is that why you reacted so strongly to my grandmother's recipe?" "Yes." Kellara's skin rippled with pink and gold again. "I have never tasted food made with such open love for strangers. On our world, such sharing would be unthinkable. It would be like—" She paused, checking her translator. "Like sharing your deepest secrets with everyone you meet." The other Zixteri was still watching them, trying to appear casual but clearly interested. Marcus made a decision. He reached into his cooler and pulled out another container of dumplings. "Excuse me," he called to the observer. "Would you like to try some?" The stranger's skin flashed with surprise and uncertainty. Kellara stood up quickly, her glow pulsing with excitement. "It's okay, sister," she said in their native language, which sounded like chiming bells to Marcus's ears. "This human's food, it carries true kindness. You can trust it." Hesitantly, the newcomer approached. Marcus noticed she wore the same type of refugee center clothing as Kellara. He prepared a plate of dumplings with sauce, just as he had done earlier. The second Zixteri's reaction was just as dramatic as Kellara's had been. Her dim glow burst into brilliant swirls of color, and she too began to cry glowing tears. "How?" she asked through her translator. "How can food from a stranger feel like home?" "Because," Kellara explained, her own glow synchronizing with her fellow refugees, "humans don't guard their emotions in their cooking like we do. They share their love freely through their food. It's why they have so many restaurants, so many food shops. Each one is a place where they share pieces of themselves with anyone who wants to receive them." Marcus listened to this explanation with growing understanding. No wonder his grandmother had always insisted that cooking without love was just assembly. She'd known, somehow, what Zixteri could perceive directly. That food made with care carried something special. By now, the second Zixteri's glow matched Kellara's healthy radiance. She introduced herself as Minra and explained that she had arrived on the same refugee ship as Kellara. "Please," Minra said, her translator struggling to convey the depth of her emotion, "will you teach us about human food sharing? We have so much to learn." Marcus looked at his small food truck, then at the two glowing aliens who had found hope in his grandmother's dumplings. He smiled. "I think we all have a lot to learn from each other." Word spread quickly through the Zixteri refugee community. Over the next few days, Marcus noticed more and more of them walking past his food truck, their dim glows betraying their poor health and hunger. Each time he shared food with one of them, their lights would burst into brilliant colors, drawing even more attention. On the fourth day after meeting Kellara, Marcus arrived at his truck to find her already waiting. She wasn't alone. 5 other Zixteri stood with her, their glows barely visible in the morning light. "Marcus," Kellara said, her healthy blue glow pulsing with nervousness, These are the elders from our refugee group. They wish to understand how you prepare food with such open emotions. The eldest of the group stepped forward. His skin had a slight green tinge to its glow, and his translator device looked older than the others. "I am Elder Vexton," he said, his metallic voice carrying authority, despite its artificial nature. "We must understand something important about your food sharing." Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and gave a small bow, remembering how Caldera had shown respect earlier. "Of course, Elder. What would you like to know?" "Our people," Vexton said slowly. "We nearly died out because of our food customs." The elder's glow dimmed even further as he spoke. 3 generations ago, a great plague struck our world. It broke the bonds between families. Many could no longer share food with their loved ones because the emotional connections had been damaged. Millions starved, surrounded by food they could not eat because it lacked the proper emotional resonance. Marcus felt his heart sink as he began to understand the deeper meaning behind the Sixteri's careful food customs. "That must have been terrible," he said softly. "It was." Another elder spoke up, her glow flickering with old pain. "We survived only because a few of us learned to form new bonds quickly. But the trauma changed our society. We became even more careful about food sharing, more protective of our emotional connections." Caldera stepped closer to Marcus. "But your food," she said, "it carries emotions freely given, with no expectation of return bonds. This is something we thought impossible." Marcus thought about his grandmother, about all the times she had cooked for strangers and friends alike. "In human culture," he explained, "sharing food is often how we begin friendships, not how we prove them. Every time my grandmother taught me a recipe, she would say, 'Cook like you're cooking for family, even if you've never met them before.'" The elders' glows pulsed with surprise at this statement. They spoke among themselves in their bell-like language, their colors shifting through various shades as they discussed. Finally, Elder Vexton turned back to Marcus. "Young human, would you be willing to teach us about your way of food preparation? Not just the recipes, but the emotional openness you bring to it." Marcus looked at his small food truck, then at the hopeful faces of the Sixteri elders. He thought about his grandmother, who had always said that food was a universal language of love. "I would be honored," he said, "but I think we should learn from each other. I want to understand your culture too, so I don't accidentally disrespect your traditions." The elders' glows brightened noticeably at this response. Elder Vexton's green tinge took on a warmer hue. "Perhaps," the elder said, "this is why the universe guided us to Earth. Not just because humans can eat the same foods we can, but because you might teach us how to heal ancient wounds we didn't even know we carried." As Marcus began to set up his truck for the day, he watched Caldera explaining his cooking methods to the elders. Their glows synchronized occasionally, showing their shared emotions. He smiled, realizing that his grandmother had been right all along. Food really could build bridges between worlds. News of Marcus's food truck spread through the alien district like wildfire. 2 weeks after his meeting with the elders, his small corner of Queens had become a gathering spot for Sixteri from all over New York City. Their glowing forms created beautiful light shows every morning as they shared meals and stories. Caldera had become a regular helper at the truck, explaining human food customs to her people and Sixteri traditions to Marcus. Today, she was teaching him about their light patterns while he prepared dumplings. "The color changes aren't just automatic," she explained, her own glow a calm blue as she worked. "They're part of how we communicate. See Minra over there." She pointed to where Minra was eating with a group of younger Sixteri. The pink ripples in her glow show she's sharing happy memories. Marcus watched the light display with growing understanding. Is that why everyone's colors sometimes sync up when they eat together? Yes. Caldera's skin flashed yellow with excitement. "We call it harmony sharing. It's very rare to see it happen with food from strangers, but you're cooking." She paused, searching for the right words. "It makes it easy to connect." A commotion at the end of the street caught their attention. A human news crew was setting up cameras, pointing them toward the food truck and the glowing group of Scifi customers. First alien food integration success story. One reporter announced into her microphone. Local food truck becomes cultural phenomenon. Some of the Scifi dimmed their glows nervously, but Kelera stepped forward, her light steady and bright. Should I speak with them? She asked Marcus. The elders said we should help humans understand our customs better. Marcus nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. Just remember what we practiced. Simple words, clear explanations. The reporter approached them eagerly. Can you tell us how this amazing cultural exchange started? Kelera's glow pulsed gently as she spoke into the microphone. It began with kindness, she said, her translator creating clear, steady English. Marcus shared his food with me when I was hungry, but he shared more than just food. He shared the love and care that went into making it. The reporter looked confused. Love and care. Our people can taste emotions in food, Kelera explained. Most human food carries traces of feelings, but Marcus's food. She gestured to the truck, where more customers were lining up. His grandmother taught him to cook with open love for everyone, not just family or friends. For us, this is revolutionary. The camera panned across the street, capturing the beautiful light display of happy Scifi sharing meals. Marcus noticed that even the camera operator's eyes were wide with wonder at the sight. And what about the health benefits? The reporter asked. We've heard reports that Scifi refugees are showing improved health after eating here. Food without emotional connection doesn't nourish us properly, Kelera said. Many of us were struggling with the refugee center's meals, but here, she gestured to her own bright glow. Here, we find both physical and emotional nourishment. As the interview continued, Marcus served another group of customers, a mix of humans and Scifi eating together, sharing stories and laughter. He thought about how his small food truck had become something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Elder Vexton approached the truck, his once dim green glow now bright and steady. Your grandmother's wisdom grows more remarkable each day, he said softly. She understood something we have forgotten. That food can build new bonds as easily as it can strengthen old ones. Marcus smiled, watching the colors dance around his truck. She always said her recipes were magic, he replied. I guess she was right in more ways than she knew. The morning started like any other at Marcus's food truck. The line of customers stretched down the block, their Scifi glows creating beautiful patterns in the early sunlight. But everything changed when 3 official-looking cars pulled up to the curb. Health Department, announced a tall woman in a dark suit, flashing her badge. We need to speak with the owner. Marcus stepped forward, wiping his hands on his apron. Kelera moved to stand beside him, her glow shifting from calm blue to worried purple. Mr. Chen, the woman said, checking her tablet, we've received reports about you serving food to Scifi refugees. Are you aware that there are no approved safety protocols for alien consumption of Earth food? The crowd of customers grew quiet. Even the usual morning traffic seemed to pause. But they've been eating here for weeks, Marcus protested. Look at how much healthier they are. He gestured to the brightly glowing Scifi around his truck. The health inspector shook her head. Visible improvements aside, we don't have proper research on long-term effects. Until we can establish safety guidelines, we'll have to shut down any unauthorized alien food service. Elder Vexton stepped forward, his green glow pulsing steadily. Please, he said through his translator, you don't understand. Traditional human food preparation actually makes Earth ingredients safer for us than our own methods. The inspector looked surprised. Can you explain that? Our scientists at the refugee center have been studying it. Kelera added quickly. The emotional energy humans put into cooking changes the food at a molecular level. It makes it more compatible with our digestive system. Emotional energy. The inspector raised an eyebrow. That's not very scientific. Another health department official stepped forward with his own tablet. Ma'am, you should see this data. The refugee center's medical team has been tracking the Scifi who eat here. Their health markers are significantly better than those who don't. Marcus watched nervously as the officials huddled together, discussing in low voices. Around them, his customers, both human and Zixteri, waited anxiously. Some of the Zixteri's glows had dimmed with worry, creating shadows where there had been light. Finally, the lead inspector turned back to Marcus. "We can't ignore the health department's regulations," she said firmly. "But," she paused, looking at the hopeful faces around her, "we can fast-track a research study. If we can prove this food is safe, we can create new guidelines specifically for Zixteri consumption." "How long will that take?" Marcus asked, thinking about all the people who depended on his food now. "Usually months, but given the circumstances." The inspector looked at the crowd again, particularly at some of the dimmer Zixteri who clearly needed a good meal. "We can set up temporary approval pending investigation. You'll need to participate in the study, document everything, and work with our scientists." Elder Vexton's glow brightened. "We will help," he said. "Our people can explain how human cooking methods affect our biology. Perhaps together we can understand this mystery." The inspector nodded. "All right. You can stay open for now, but we'll need to set up proper monitoring equipment. And Mr. Chen," she looked directly at Marcus, "you'll need to teach our scientists exactly how you prepare your food. Every detail matters." As the officials began setting up their equipment, Calera turned to Marcus, her glow swirling with mixed emotions. "Your grandmother's recipes are about to become the subject of scientific study," she said, her translator carrying a hint of amusement. Marcus laughed, already pulling out his recipe notebook. "She always did say cooking was a science," he replied, "though I don't think she ever imagined alien scientists would be studying her dumplings." Around them, the crowd began to relax as they realized the food truck would stay open. The morning light once again filled with the beautiful colors of happy Zixteri sharing meals, now with the added silver glint of scientific instruments recording every detail of this unexpected cultural bridge. The food truck looked very different a week after the health department's visit. Scientific equipment covered one whole counter, monitoring everything from temperature to molecular changes in the food. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, stood watching the screens with fascination. "This is incredible," she said, pointing to one of the displays. "Watch what happens when you start cooking with positive intentions." Marcus leaned over to look while stirring a pot of soup. The screen showed tiny particles of food glowing and changing structure as he cooked. "Our instruments have never picked up anything like this before," Dr. Chen continued. "The molecular structure of the food actually becomes more compatible with Zixteri biology when it's cooked with emotional intent." Calera, who had been helping translate the Zixteri's experiences, nodded. "This is why we couldn't just eat any prepared food," she explained. "Without the proper emotional resonance, the molecules remain." She paused, looking for the right word. "Locked." Elder Vexton walked up to the truck, his green glow bright with excitement. "Dr. Chen, you should see this." He handed her a tablet with more test results. "We've been studying the differences between food cooked by machines at the refugee center and food cooked here." The scientist's eyes widened as she read. "The nutritional content is technically the same, but the absorption rate in Zixteri bodies is completely different. They're getting almost twice the nutrients from Marcus's cooking." Marcus continued stirring his soup, thinking about his grandmother. "She always said cooking was like magic, that you had to put love into the food to make it special. I thought she was just being poetic." She was right. Dr. Chen said, still studying the data. "We're seeing chemical changes that match what happens in Zixteri traditional cooking, but the human method is actually more efficient. Instead of requiring deep personal bonds, it works with any genuine positive emotion." Calera's glow brightened. "This could help so many of our people, not just here on Earth, but back home too. Many who lost family bonds in the plagues still struggle with proper nutrition." As they talked, more customers gathered around the truck. The health department's presence hadn't scared people away. If anything, The scientific validation had brought more curious humans to try the food that could create such remarkable effects. Dr. Chen watched as Marcus served a bowl of soup to a young Zixteri child. The child's dim glow burst into bright colors at the first taste, and the scientist quickly noted the readings on her instruments. "The effect is strongest with children," she observed. "Their bodies seem more responsive to the molecular changes. In our culture," Elder Vexton explained, "children usually only eat food prepared by their parents. Their bodies are tuned to familiar emotional patterns. But human cooking," he gestured to the happy child, "it contains such universal love that any child can absorb it." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion as he watched the child enjoy the soup. He thought about all the times his grandmother had cooked for neighborhood kids, saying every child deserved a hot meal made with love. "Dr. Chen," he said suddenly, "could we teach others to cook this way? Not just for Zixteri, but for anyone who needs it." The scientist smiled, already typing notes into her tablet. "That's our next step. We need to understand exactly what makes your cooking different, then develop training programs. The health department is already talking about creating new guidelines for alien food service." Kellera's glow pulsed with joy. "Marcus, do you realize what this means? You're not just feeding people anymore. You're helping create a whole new way of sharing food between species." Marcus looked around at his small truck, now transformed into a scientific research station, and smiled. His grandmother had always said food could change the world. He just hadn't expected it to change other worlds too. 1 month after the scientific studies began, Marcus's food truck had become the center of something much bigger. The city had cleared out an old community center nearby, turning it into what they call the Interstellar Culinary Institute. Today, Marcus stood in its newly renovated kitchen, facing his first class of students, a mix of humans and Zixteri. "Remember," he said, holding up a dumpling wrapper, "the technique is important, but what really matters is how you feel while cooking." Behind him, screens displayed the molecular changes happening in the food as he worked. Kellera, now officially his teaching assistant, added, "Watch his glow monitor." She pointed to another screen showing a human-designed device that detected emotional energy, inspired by the Zixteri's natural ability to see such things. The students leaned forward, their Zixteri members glowing with interest as Marcus began to fold the dumpling. The monitor showed waves of warm colors spreading from his hands into the food. "My grandmother taught me to think about who would eat the food," Marcus explained, carefully pinching the edges. "She said every fold should be made with care, thinking about how it would make someone happy." A young human chef raised her hand. "But how do we know if we're doing it right? We can't see the emotions like Zixteri can." "That's why we're here," Elder Vexton said from his place at the back of the room. The old Zixteri had become a regular teacher at the Institute. "Our people can help guide humans in understanding emotional cooking. In return, you teach us how to cook with universal love rather than just personal bonds." Dr. Chen, who now ran the research side of the Institute, stepped forward with her latest findings. "We've discovered that human cooking methods actually help break down harmful compounds in earth foods that would normally be dangerous for Zixteri. The emotional energy somehow catalyzes this process. Think of it like adding a special ingredient," Marcus added, seeing some confused faces. "Only this ingredient comes from your heart, not your pantry." The class practiced making dumplings for the next hour. Each student had both a glow monitor and a Zixteri partner to help them understand the emotional aspects of their cooking. The kitchen filled with light as the alien students sampled each attempt, their glows showing how well each cook had managed to infuse their food with positive energy. "This is better than our traditional methods," one elderly Zixteri student commented, her glow pulsing with amazement. "We don't have to spend years building trust bonds before we can nourish each other." A group of refugee center officials watched from the doorway, taking notes. The success of Marcus's program had caught the attention of refugee support organizations worldwide. Plans were already being made to open similar institutes in other cities with large alien populations. "Mr. Chen, One official called out, "We've received requests from 3 other refugee species asking if they can join the program. They've seen the success with the Zixteri and wonder if human cooking might help them too." Marcus looked at Kellara, who now glowed with a constant, healthy radiance. She smiled and nodded encouragingly. "Of course they can join," Marcus said. "Food brings everyone together. That's what my grandmother always said. We just never knew how right she was until now." As the class continued practicing, Marcus watched the beautiful mixture of human concentration and Zixteri light displays. Each successful dumpling brought new bursts of color. Each failure was met with patient guidance from both species. "You know," Kellara said softly, standing beside him, "when you first shared your lunch with me, I thought you were just being kind to one hungry refugee. But you were actually starting a revolution in how species can care for each other." Marcus smiled, remembering that first morning. "Sometimes," he said, "the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness." The news arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Marcus was teaching a new group of students at the Interstellar Culinary Institute when Kellara burst into the classroom, her entire body glowing so brightly that everyone had to shield their eyes. "Marcus," she called out, her translator barely keeping up with her excitement. "The Zixteri High Council has seen our research. They've sent a message from our homeworld." The classroom erupted with gasps and flashing lights as the Zixteri students reacted to the news. Elder Vexton hurried in behind Kellara, his usually calm green glow now sparking with gold highlights. "They want to send a scientific delegation," the elder announced. "Our world's greatest food scientists and medical experts want to study what we've discovered here." Marcus wiped his hands on his apron, trying to process this news. "But I thought your homeworld was very traditional about food customs." "They were," Kellara explained, her glow settling into a bright, steady pulse. "But the results from our institute are impossible to ignore. The health improvements in our refugees, the new cooking techniques, the way human emotional energy makes Earth food safe for us. It's revolutionary." Dr. Chen rushed in with her tablet, already pulling up data displays. "The High Council scientists have reviewed all our research," she said excitedly. "They say this could be the solution to their world's ongoing food crisis." The students gathered around as Dr. Chen projected a message from the Zixteri homeworld. The alien text glowed softly as it floated in the air, with an English translation below. "To Marcus Chen and the Earth scientists, your discovery of universal emotional cooking techniques may be the most significant breakthrough in Zixteri nutrition since the Great Plague. We request permission to send our experts to study your methods." Marcus read the message twice, remembering the first day Kellara had tasted his dumplings. Back then, he'd just been trying to help one hungry person. Now, his grandmother's recipes might help an entire world. "There's more," Elder Vexton said softly. "The High Council believes your cooking method could heal the emotional trauma from the plague. Many of our people still struggle to form the food-sharing bonds that our bodies need. But your way of cooking, with love for strangers, it bypasses the trauma completely." One of the Zixteri students raised her hand. "Does this mean we can teach these methods back home?" "My family." Her glow dimmed slightly with old sadness. "They haven't been able to share food properly since the plague." "That's exactly what the council wants to learn," Kellara answered. "They want to understand how humans put universal love into their cooking, so they can teach our people to do the same." Marcus looked around at his classroom. The mixing bowls and cooking tools now shared space with advanced scientific equipment. Humans and aliens worked side by side, learning to cook with both technical skill and emotional awareness. It was more than his grandmother could have ever imagined for her little family recipes. "When will the delegation arrive?" he asked. "Next week," Dr. Chen replied. "And Marcus, they specifically requested to visit your food truck first. They want to see where it all began." Marcus smiled, thinking of his small truck that had started this whole adventure. "Well," he said, "we should prepare something special for them." something that shows them exactly what human cooking can do. The class immediately burst into excited planning, humans and Scifi working together to design a menu that would demonstrate their new shared cooking style. Their excitement filled the room with swirling colors and happy chatter. "You know," Kellara said quietly to Marcus, "on our world, there's an old saying, food feeds the body, but love feeds the soul. We just never knew that humans had figured out how to do both at once." The day the Scifi delegation arrived, Marcus's food truck was spotless. He had spent hours preparing everything, making sure each pot and pan shined. Kellara stood beside him, her glow steady but nervous, as they watched the alien ship land in a specially cleared area of the park. "Remember," she whispered, "the head scientist hasn't eaten food prepared by a stranger in 40 years. Not since the plague." Marcus nodded, carefully checking his ingredients one last time. The dumplings had to be perfect today. Students from the institute stood nearby, both humans and Scifi, all watching with excitement as the ship's door opened. The head scientist of the Scifi High Council stepped out first. She was taller than any Scifi Marcus had seen before, her natural glow a deep purple that seemed to ripple like water. Behind her came 5 other scientists, their glows forming a rainbow of colors. Elder Vexton stepped forward to greet them in their native language, the bell-like sounds echoing across the quiet park. Dr. Chen stood ready with her instruments, eager to document everything about this historic meeting. The head scientist approached Marcus's truck, her translator device humming softly. "You are the human who discovered how to cook with universal love?" she asked, her artificial voice carrying a note of wonder. "I just cooked the way my grandmother taught me," Marcus replied honestly. "She always said food should be made with love, no matter who you're cooking for." The scientist's glow flickered with interest. "And this method somehow makes Earth food safe for our people to eat." "It's more than just safe," Kellara spoke up. "Watch." She turned to Marcus and nodded. Marcus took a deep breath and began preparing a fresh batch of dumplings. The scientific instruments around the truck lit up, recording every movement, every molecular change. He thought about his grandmother, about all the people these dumplings might help, letting those feelings flow into his cooking. The head scientist watched the monitors intently. "Remarkable," she said. "The emotional energy is actually changing the food structure. But how can you maintain such positive feelings while cooking for strangers?" Marcus smiled as he folded each dumpling carefully. "I don't think of anyone as a stranger when I'm cooking. Food brings people together. That's what my grandmother always said. When I cook, I think about how the food will make someone's day better, even if I don't know them." Finally, the dumplings were ready. Marcus placed them on a clean plate and offered them to the head scientist. Everyone watched as she slowly picked one up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, her purple glow burst into a brilliant display of colors that no one had ever seen before. Tears of light rolled down her face as she ate. "I haven't been able to eat food from someone new since I lost my family in the plague," she said softly. "But this feels like coming home." One by one, the other scientists tried the dumplings. Each one's glow transformed into beautiful patterns of light. The park filled with their combined radiance, creating a light show that attracted attention from blocks away. "We must learn this technique," the head scientist declared. "Not just the cooking method, but this whole way of thinking about food and connection. Our world has been trapped in fear for too long." Dr. Chen stepped forward with a proposal. "We've already set up an exchange program. Human chefs can visit your world to teach, and your scientists can study here." The head scientist's glow pulsed with approval. "Yes," she said, "and we will start with these dumplings. They will become a symbol of hope for our people, proof that even strangers can nourish each other's souls." 1 year after the delegation's visit, Marcus stood in the main hall of the new International Interstellar Culinary Academy. The building was much bigger than his old food truck, which now sat in a place of honor in the entrance hall. Above it, a hologram showed the moment he had first shared his dumplings with Kellara, their meeting now preserved as a historic moment. Today was graduation day for the first class of certified interstellar chefs. Humans and aliens from 6 different species filled the room, all trained in the art of emotional cooking. At the front of the crowd, Kellara stood proudly as the Academy's co-director, her glow bright and steady. "Can you believe how much has changed in just 1 year?" she asked, watching the graduates take their seats. Her translator wasn't needed much these days. She had learned to speak English almost perfectly. Marcus smiled, adjusting his chef's jacket. On the sleeve was a patch showing Earth and the Zixteri homeworld connected by a glowing dumpling. "My grandmother would have loved this," he said, though she might have been surprised to see her recipes being taught on 2 worlds. The latest report from the Zixteri homeworld was displayed on screens around the room. The numbers showed amazing progress. 50 new cooking schools opened, thousands of plague survivors now able to eat communal meals again, and a whole generation of children growing up without food trauma. Elder Vexton, now the head of cultural exchange between Earth and the Zixteri world, stepped up to the podium. His green glow was bright and clear as he addressed the graduates. "When I first came to Earth," he said, "our people were still trapped in the shadow of the plague. We thought we could only eat food made by those we deeply trusted. Now, look around this room." Everyone turned to watch as student chefs from each species began serving their final projects. Human chefs had learned to cook with visible emotional energy, their food glowing softly like Zixteri dishes. Zixteri chefs had mastered cooking with universal love, their food bringing tears of joy to human eyes. "Today, you graduate not just as chefs," Elder Vexton continued, "but as bridges between worlds. Each meal you prepare will bring healing and connection to someone who needs it." Dr. Chen stood up next, holding her latest research results. "The molecular gastronomy team has confirmed that emotional cooking techniques work for all known sentient species. Something about the way humans naturally cook with love creates universal changes in food at the quantum level." Marcus watched as his students served their dishes. Each one had learned to put their heart into their cooking, just as his grandmother had taught him. The room filled with happy sounds and glowing light as everyone shared the graduation feast. Kellara touched his arm gently. "Look," she said, pointing to a young Zixteri girl sharing her human-made cookies with a human child. Both were smiling, no translators needed. "This is your real legacy. Not just the science or the schools, but the simple act of sharing food with love." As the celebration continued, Marcus walked back to his old food truck. Inside, laminated on the wall, was his grandmother's original dumpling recipe. Below it now hung a picture of her, smiling in her kitchen, and a plaque that read, "Where interstellar cuisine began, with one act of kindness." "You were right, Grandma," he whispered, touching the recipe card gently. "Food really is magic. It just took some hungry aliens to help us prove it." Behind him, the sounds of the graduation party mixed with the soft chiming of Zixteri joy songs. Humans and aliens sat together, sharing meals and stories, their differences forgotten in the simple pleasure of good food made with love. Marcus smiled, knowing that somewhere out there, on countless worlds, people would gather to share meals just like this. And maybe, just maybe, his grandmother's dumplings would help bring peace to the whole galaxy, one bite at a time.